Welcome to Careers in Accounting. Today we're pleased to have Dan Special join us from Mallinckrodt. So Dan, I'll let you explain your exact role in Mallinckrodt.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm presently the Senior Vice President of Finance, in addition to being the corporate controller and head of investor relations. And I'm also the generics CFO as well.
So we get lots of roles.
Lots of responsibilities,
So
yeah, exactly.
You'll pass on a lot of experiences with us. So maybe we could start off with, could you explain a little bit how you became interested in accounting? What led you to your starting in public accounting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in public accounting back in 2006. At that time period, the world was dealing with the aftermath of the tech bubble that had burst, obviously, and then you obviously have a recession that was going to be taking place a couple of years later. For me, it was just a really good opportunity to go into a profession that had a defined path. You've got a number of public accounting firms, the big four, obviously, and then obviously firms that are outside of that too. They've been doing these jobs for hundreds of years at this point. And so, from my perspective, it was a really safe decision to go into public accounting because you knew what you were going to have. You knew you were going to have this opportunity ahead of you that, if you invested in it, you were going to be investing in your future. And that future could pay off really handsomely, both in the job satisfaction that you had, and the impact that you were making, but then also financially as a profession as well.
Yeah. So you obviously didn't stay. You started at PwC. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the opportunities that a person gets by starting in public accounting, what you maybe saw from colleagues and your personal experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think one of the most natural veins that you can go into when you exit, and I was on the assurance practice at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So, you could go more in a reporting and technical accounting role. You could go into internal audit. You could go into a financial analyst type role. Accounting really provides you just such a solid base level of knowledge about a business and how to assess it, how to pick up a set of financial statements of a public company and really understand what is happening at the business, whether they're profitable, whether they're, a struggling, dying business, or whether they're growing, or where they're going. And so to me, I found that stuff fascinating. I found it really neat to be able to just pick up, a pretty cold document and be able to have a good history and understanding of where the business is going. So, for myself personally, I felt that leaving to go to Mallinckrodt at the time in a technical accounting role, which was what my opportunity was, really allowed me to take an extension of what I was doing in public accounting. Mallinckrodt was just preparing to spin off of Covidien back in 2013 when I left to go there. I knew there was going to be this transformation path. Assuming we were able to get a successful spinoff to occur, there was going to be this transformation that occurred. The desires of the management team at that time were really to pivot the business away from what we were doing historically into a brand new business. And, for an accounting person, that provided an opportunity set of acquisitions, potential divestitures, working with senior leadership at a really young age to be able to shape what this organization was going to be moving forward. And I felt that if I could come in that opportunity, being able to prove myself through those types of opportunities would open other doors for my career as it progressed over the years to come. And it really did. I mean, it's been a really fascinating journey for myself, and I think it really is all attributed to my desire to go into accounting, to work at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and to have that base level of knowledge that allowed me to critically think, and then being able to apply that to really any situation that I've gone into now.
Interesting. So, sounds like you do a lot more than just classical accounting. You've migrated to a couple different roles. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So back in 2016, I moved outside of the controllership realm into investor relations, which is an area that I didn't really even know existed whenever I was going through school. There really isn't a program that says this is how you do IR. So from an investor relations perspective, I mean, I was interacting with hedge funds, some of the largest hedge funds in the world, visiting with them in New York City or in Boston or in London, really talking about the business. And from my perspective, it gave me an opportunity to draw on my past to then define where I wanted to go in the future. And so, from having that base level of knowledge in the accounting and all the deals that we had done, I could then sit across the table from an investor, talk very sophisticatedly about our business and what we were trying to do and what we were trying to accomplish, and encourage them to be able to do the work as necessary to determine whether they wanted to buy stock or sell stock or the like. And so, I was able to move into that vein that was completely outside of controllership because I had the past that I had, and it allowed me to do it really successfully. And, the level of interaction that I had with both sell side and buy side analysts as we went through that process was fascinating because they actually, I think, valued my historical knowledge of the business and being able to put it into layman's terms as well, which I think is, a necessary trait. When you're really deep in something, you've got to be able to pull it up so all audiences can understand it.
Yeah. And probably comforting as well that you had that base accounting knowledge, that you weren't going to get stumped with questions or something like that because you were ingrained in that as well.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
I'm interested in hearing a little bit about some interesting projects you've been working on recently. Can you talk about those?
Sure. So two areas that I'll highlight at this point. One, Mallinckrodt has been in the press a lot recently. We've been in the process of filing bankruptcy and working through that process. We really have a business that is strong from a fundamental perspective, but unfortunately we have a balance sheet and a set of liabilities that are very different. And so I've been working collaboratively with our kind of overall CFO and then our treasurer as well, negotiating new debt deals and negotiating settlements with the opioid trust to kind of work through each of these different avenues of how do we reshape what our balance sheet's going to look like going forward. And so, from my perspective, it's been fascinating to sit across the table from kind of the opioid trust and understanding what's important to them and making sure that we can obviously, stand up for their rights and what they want in relation to our first lien creditors or our second lien creditors. And so, from our perspective, it's been a very successful process thus far. We've been able to get to an agreement that has, over 90% of support from each of the different constituencies. And I think, nobody's going to ever be happy in a situation where somebody's got to give something up. And that's the situation, unfortunately, we find ourselves. But to have that level of support, to me, means that we've gotten ourselves in a really good place. And I hope it sets this business up for success as we move into the future and go on from here. I think we're all itching to be able to get back to a time when we're out of bankruptcy and obviously can thrive. And being at the table and having these discussions, I feel really excited about what the opportunity is going to be for the business moving forward.
Yeah, very interesting. And I'm sure you never thought you would be involved in such a topic at the early phases of your career. But that, as you mentioned, that path to get into business where that accounting provides you, gets you to where you're at a point where you can experience these types of things professionally.
Without a doubt. And I think I really do draw back on, being able to be newly out of college, working on, an IPO project or a company that's going through Sarbanes-Oxley for the first time. You can draw on these experiences where you really were in, higher stress, high risk, high reward type situations from a career development perspective. And as long as you have this desire to learn and this curiosity, I think you can be successful in whatever you choose to do. But being able to do those things and have those experiences allowed me to be able to draw on them in times where, I sit today in present day, which is cool.
So I want to connect this to younger people that are thinking about what do they want to do in a business career. And so to me, it's interesting that my experience at PwC, having recently retired, is I see the leadership of the firm, and there's relatively older professionals that were looking to do something else with the remaining time. And so I always thought the complexity that you're dealing with on your side, the complexity the firm was dealing with, is never going to go away. Yeah. And I was always interested in, well, where's the next generation going to come from? These are fantastic careers. You can attest to one. I can attest to one. And the younger people just aren't coming into that field, and the business world demands it. They have to have that level of expertise.
No, I think they absolutely do. And I think unfortunately we need to find a way to bring more people into accounting. This is not, your father's accounting or your grandfather's accounting that is, a bit more monotonous than what you'd expect. I mean, I think some of the technological changes that we've seen over the last, decade even, and it's going to happen even more over the next 5 to 10 years, 20 years as well. You're seeing a lot of the monotony be put aside and be put into a box that's a bit more standard because of technological changes. And so I think what that allows you to do is be able to step back and focus on, okay, how do I take the beauty of technology and what it's been able to solve for me, translate it to be able to have a conversation with somebody about how it impacts your business, put it at a level that an executive can understand it, and then being able to use your brain power to things that are much more valuable. And I think, I know when I was a first year in accounting, there were certain things that still weren't over the hump on from a technological perspective. And I think, it'd be really interesting. I know, especially as I interact with some of our auditors today, some of the challenges that they deal with are different than what they were, 5, 10, 15 years ago now. And I think, that really does allow that level of, intelligence that these individuals have when they come out of college, and the curiosity that they have to really thrive in a situation where they're not bogged down by things that may take them too much time.
Yeah, I've always felt that the technology kind of transformation, if you will, in the business is for an accountant is not going to obsolete the accountant. It's just going to make your skill set that's rewarded different.
That's right.
Not the how do you know something or can you recite a rule or anything like that. It's how do you apply the rule to a complicated set of facts. And as you're saying, how do you explain it to someone? You're dealing with lots of different constituents, not just upper management. And that's got to be a challenge because each room you walk into,
different level of knowledge,
audience,
different
level of
background.
knowledge. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, from an investor perspective, I'll deal with doctors that are, very scientific, and you're trying to explain financial terms to them, or you're going to deal with somebody who's a CPA, MBA, finance through and through. So,
So the other aspect of technology is I think you touched on a little bit is how does it help with your work-life flexibility? We all have lives outside of outside the office. So how does that kind of help you kind of manage your life and your work responsibilities?
Absolutely. So I've got four relatively young kids at this point, and it's really important for me to be present and visible to them. I had parents that were always around, and they made that a commitment. And I think you have to make sacrifices and choices in your life and how you choose to do those things. I choose to want to be present, and that has not held me back from a career perspective at all. I think I've got a really good situation where I've got a strong CFO that has a young family that desires to spend time with his, and I think he's ingrained a culture around him that it's okay to be able to sacrifice something on the work side if you need to do something on the personal side, and vice versa. It works both ways. You ultimately just need to make sure that you step back and understand, what is the deadline? What is the key deliverable? What do I need to get done? And as long as you understand what those things are, the path in order to get there or how you accomplish that can be open. And I don't think it's as rigid as what it may have been, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I think people understand that it's okay if you need to put an hour in at 9:00 at night because you had all afternoon that your kids had a recital or a game or something along those lines. It just is what it is. And I think people are flexible with that. So I think the key is doing high level work or doing a quality work product, making sure that people understand if you have a situation, but then making sure that you also set your priorities straight. And if your priorities are in line, you'll be able to accomplish both.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I thought the profession really switched gears when we had to adapt to the pandemic. And
absolutely.
Because prior to that, I think you probably experienced it as well. When someone needed to work from home, there was kind of a stigma. Oh, okay, you're going to have your feet up and watch some TV during the day. And so, but when we were forced to do that and we still had responsibilities to meet, it just changed the mindset. And it's like we work collaboratively. We use tools to the extent we can. And that communication of what's the deadline, how are we going to jointly attack it and get to that deadline, and how you get there is not really, that's for you to decide, not me to decide.
Absolutely.
So I've really found that helpful. Actually, that's one byproduct of the pandemic that's actually
absolutely. And I think one of the challenges obviously has been you had a workforce that was young, that was old, that was everywhere in between. Everybody had different ideas, and I think this really kind of brought everybody back down to a kind of a similar playing field. And it's like, okay, well, we have been able to continue to get things done and being at home. So maybe we should allow some flexibility where in the past maybe it was a bit more close-minded. I think people's minds are open now, and I think that's gonna be here to stay. Obviously, it's competitive advantages for companies to be able to recruit talent, being able to offer that level of flexibility.
How do you feel, though, if a young person comes to you and they want to largely work remotely? Obviously, you can work anywhere. I assume you're going to be adaptable in any scenario. But for a younger person that still needs to develop skills and those social skills that we talked about how do you present a particular complicated topic? That's hard to do if you're constantly remote.
It is, and I think. I think all age groups, in your profession, need to understand that. I think if you're longer in your career, you still need to invest the time in younger talent. Otherwise, to your point, you're going to create this gap that's
Yep.
going to exist. I think if you're younger in your career, I don't think it's you need to go sit in the office and be there for 5 days, but you really need to value the opportunities that you have to engage with your team members, whether it's through Zoom or whether it's in person. Still building that teaming environment is really important as you move forward. I've always, I'm obviously not in public accounting right now, but I'd be curious to see what it looks like today, because I think when you look at those individuals freshly out of college, they're in this environment where there's a lot of people that are all around the same age, plus or minus 2 or 3 years, 5 years, and they're all working together. They value being together. I know.
Yep.
I think that's important, and I think using those opportunities to be able to be visible to a client, to be visible to your team, they need to be valued, and I think they are. I think they will be. I think just making sure that you maximize the opportunities that you get as a young professional.
Yep. Let's talk compensation, because
Sure.
I know that's a concern for a younger person, as it should be.
Yep.
Of all factors, compensation is very important. But I think accounting has a perception of being poor at the front end.
Yeah.
And I know, at least from my experience, I think it's probably your experience as well, how it's much more of a hockey stick approach for accounting, right or wrong. That's just the way the profession is structured.
Yep.
But can you talk about your experiences specifically about both within public accounting, how your compensation looked over the near term, and then what it looked like when you decided to leave public accounting and go to Mallinckrodt?
Yeah, sure. So I think you're absolutely right. I do think the accounting profession probably needs to do better than what they're doing right now, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves with the need for talent. Ultimately, we're in an environment today where it's pretty easy to get a job, and so when it's easy to get a job, you're in a situation where you probably do have a lot of choice. As you and I talked about, how did we get into this profession? I felt comfort of job was a really important aspect. And so, being able to be compensated, which I thought was a fair amount. I mean, obviously everybody would love to make more money right now, but I also viewed it as an investment in myself. And so, I was making enough money to live. I was able to have, the freedoms that I needed to do and live the way that I wanted to live. And I was young and I wasn't married and I didn't have kids. And that's pretty much a lot of people that are in that age group. And so, year in, year out, as a person that was a high performer, you could expect to receive, greater than 10% pay increases almost on an annual basis, and more than that whenever you got promoted too. So very quickly you went from a number that was, I thought, fair to a much better number very quickly, and bonuses were good and times were good too. So I always felt that focusing on public accounting, that if you, I don't want to say sacrifice, that's not the right word, but if you invested in yourself, that the dividend was going to pay off when you're between, the ages of 30 and 50, likely. And so if you could stay another year, that may exponentially increase your longer term earnings potential. And, it's played out that way for me thus far. When I left public accounting, I think the pay increase that I got when I came to Mallinckrodt was greater than 50% of my salary, exclusive. That was just on a base, exclusive of bonus and equity potential and those types of things that existed at that time too. And what I've found at Mallinckrodt too is that when we go to recruit people, we want public accounting people. We want people that have that as a background in every area of finance. And so it's really important, I think, to have a strong base, because I think that will allow you to continue to thrive throughout your career. Ultimately, you're going to be faced with opportunities and projects that you have to do well in.
Yeah.
And I think if you do well in those things, the opportunities are endless as far as where you can go in your career, both from a role perspective, but also from a compensation perspective too.
Yeah. I think you did a nice job of showing how the compensation is very powerful. The work is very interesting, and there's less people going into it. It seems like a perfect storm to me.
It's a pinch point where you have to expect salaries are going to commensurately rise. The boats are going to rise as the tide rises.
Yes. So last topic. Besides just a young accountant, someone who's interested in accounting, for their time remaining in school and investing in learning the technical rules, any suggestions on what other areas to focus on that would maybe get them off to a good start in their career?
Yeah, I mean, I think the twofold. I think one, get internships, get engaged with a public accounting firm, go work at an industry as at a company. If you can get a couple of internships, that's great. I think those really can give you the best kind of trial run as to what a career could look like. And I think the beauty of those types of roles is that if you're going in business or you're going in finance, or you're going into accounting, those roles exist and they're out there. You have to go hunt and find them.
Yep.
So I think it's really important to use your time wisely in college as a bit of a trial run to what you may expect whenever you get out. And I think those are helpful things to be able to engage and interact with people you may work with or come across whenever you get into your full-time job. And for me, that's exactly what I saw. I had an internship like the people that I worked with, and it made that decision really easy for me to desire to go there from a full-time perspective. I think from a studies perspective, the second aspect of the question, I think focusing on ESG is really important. I think thinking about technological changes, AI obviously is a hot topic right now as well. I think anything you can do to be a differentiator in your role, those are certainly key areas that I think are getting a lot of publicity. And I think it's going to be really important, as you bring your skills to the workforce. ESG wasn't exactly a thing when I went through when we went through it. So, it's important to have a younger generation that's bringing the skill sets in these key areas that are going to be really important for years to come. And I think it's a key differentiator to be able to bring those things and then being able to talk with their managers and their bosses and executives about these really important initiatives and how best to implement them. And I think it's a really good way to be able to stand out, because if you can bring those skills and show that you're an expert in something, that door is going to open once again for you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I always relied on the younger people for any of the technology changes, just because
it's natural.
But you have different responsibilities as you're older in these organizations, and you need that kind of support.
Yep.
So Dan, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing thoughts and your experiences. It's been very, very helpful. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Happy to do it.
Thank you.